Top 3 national parks in Florida. I've lived in Florida for about 14 years, and it has quite a lot of very beautiful parks. Now, I'm going to talk about 3 national parks, but there are actually many more national preserves and seashores and things like that. But the 3 in this video are specifically with the name National Park in their title. The first one I'm going to mention is Everglades National Park. Now, as you can imagine, Everglades, it is entirely Everglades, aka swampland, but it is a very picturesque swampland. It is pretty much at the bottom of mainland Florida, and it is the 3rd largest national park in the lower 48, so it's very, very large. It has around 1.5 million acres of pretty much pure Everglades, and there are tons of things to do, from kayaking to bird watching to looking for wildlife to taking trails, fishing, pretty much anything you enjoy doing outdoors you could most likely do in the Everglades National Park. There are also plenty of trails led by the rangers there, if you want a more guided experience, you want to learn a bit more about the park. And if you really enjoy wildlife, and especially birds, you will have the time of your life in this national park. I personally have recently gotten into bird watching, and I have to say, Florida has some of the most beautiful exotic birds you could possibly imagine. From the ibises, the egrets, anhingas, other water birds, really fantastic wildlife out there. Plus, besides the birds, of course, there are the alligators, the infamous American alligators of Florida, and you might even be able to spot a rare Florida panther. So, since this park is so large, there are 3 main entrances. They are not connected, they come in from different parts of the park. The park also has a very tall observation tower that, you climb up and you could see quite a lot of the entire park. It's flatland, so you'll be able to see far away. There's also a point in the park called Flamingo, which is actually the southernmost point of mainland Florida, minus the Keys. This park is also a UNESCO World Heritage Site and an International Biosphere Reserve, so it is a big deal, not just in Florida, not just in the United States, but worldwide. When you go to the park, you kind of have to make sure you go during the right time of year. There's not really the typical 4 seasons, but instead wet season and dry season. Dry season is usually the best time to go because it's dry, it's not super humid, it's not raining all the time, and it's also the best time to view the wildlife because the wildlife prefer to be there during the dry season. If you go during the wet season, you're going to have quite a few more troubles to deal with, specifically mosquitoes. Ridiculous humidity. I mean, you walk outside, you are immediately drenched in water, and most likely it's going to be raining a lot. So, try to go during the dry season, but, the wet season isn't the end of the world either if you happen to be there during that time. Everglades National Park is definitely one of the best Florida national parks if you really want to experience what the Everglades are like. It is really the true experience, and 1.5 million acres, you could just get lost out in the wilderness. The next Florida national park on this list is Biscayne National Park. This park is actually kind of straight east of Everglades National Park, but it's kind of at the beginning of the Keys. It's kind of mostly an island. Now, the interesting thing about this particular park is that it's 95% water. And you might be wondering, well, what's the point of going to a park that's mostly water? Well, the point of this park is that most of the fun is to be done in the water. So this park is pretty crazy. It has actual shipwrecks that you can go and dive to. Many of the shipwrecks are quite old. I mean, if you imagine a pirate shipwreck, that's pretty much what you're gonna go see. A lot of them were old trading ships that sunk off the coast of Florida. Just lots of history in terms of those ships. It is also part of the Biscayne Maritime Heritage Trail. So, it's really rich in history, especially maritime history if you're into that sort of thing. And you might be wondering, well, what if I can't go diving? You don't have the permits to go diving, you don't have any experience, or you just don't want to go diving. Don't worry, the website has actually 3D models of many of the shipwrecks throughout Biscayne National Park. So even if you can't go to those shipwrecks yourself, you could still see them quite clearly, very nice 3D models So, it's the next best thing. Now, the cool thing about Biscayne National Park is that it has pretty much 10,000 years of human history that has been documented there, starting with, of course, the Native Americans, and then moving on to people who settled there later, prehistoric tribes, and even moving on to farmers like pineapple farmers and things like that. Now, since this park is mostly water, you can imagine that there are quite a few fun things you could do. Some of the most popular things that people enjoy doing are fishing, kayaking, snorkeling, diving, things like that. And of course, seeing the wildlife. If you decide to go snorkeling or diving, you will definitely see quite a lot of fish. There are more than 500 species of fish in that area, and coral reefs, so you will see quite a lot of interesting things there. There are also guided eco tours and adventures you can go through, and of course, if you are a fishing enthusiast, you can spend a lot of your time fishing there. There are some very unique fish down in that southern region of Florida, but you do have to make sure you have the proper permits and follow the regulations and things like that. You could get in trouble otherwise, but it's pretty easy to go fishing there. Just gotta make sure you follow the right rules. But Biscayne National Park is definitely a great place to be if you just want to spend the majority of your time in the water. And if you can't go in the water for whatever reason, the remainder of the park, which is on land, has some very beautiful mangrove forests that you can explore. Now, the next national park on this list is arguably one of the most interesting, is Dry Tortugas National Park. This one is pretty unique because it's 70 miles off the coast of the southernmost key of Florida. So the only way you can get there is, you can't swim there, you can't get there by your car, you either have to go by a ferry or a plane. Getting there can be a little bit expensive because of that, but it's definitely worth it. It is home to one of the largest brick structures in the world, which is called Fort Jefferson. Now, the entire park is about 100 square miles, and it consists of 7 small islands. There were quite a few other islands in the past, but they have since gone underwater. But the 7 islands that you can still visit are really entertaining to see. I mean, when you think of a tropical island paradise, that's Dry Tortugas. And the most picturesque, arguably, of all the islands is Garden Key, which is where Fort Jefferson is. Fort Jefferson is a 19th century fort, which was built between the 1840s and the 1870s, and it took 30 years to build, and it was never fully completed. Even today, it's not completed. It was specifically built to protect basically the anchorages in that very southern port of Florida, especially since that whole area was home to many, many important trade routes. So the position of this fort was extremely strategic, and it also had some military benefits. It was also used as a very important resupply point for many of the ships that would go through that area. And of course, if there were any storms or hurricanes in the area, ships could use Dry Tortugas Fort Jefferson as a nice kind of refuge. It was also important during the Civil War, which is when Union soldiers used it to blockade Southern ships. Plus, the fort itself was used as a prison for deserting Union soldiers. The fort was completely abandoned by the Union Army in around the 1870s. It was then used as a coaling station for warships in the late 1800s. Today, of course, it's a historical landmark. It's not really used for anything except to display its important place in history. And it's still not completed. It was never furnished with the weaponry that it was supposed to have to be a military defense post. But it is still pretty interesting to see. It's very large. Again, one of the largest brick structures ever. And, of course, besides Fort Jefferson, there are many other things to see within Dry Tortugas National Park. You can go to the separate smaller islands. You could go diving, snorkeling, fishing, boating, pretty much whatever you want to do out on the water. You can have quite a lot of fun there. And even though the main ways of getting there are by ferry or by plane, you can also take your own boat if you have one and drive there. But be careful because, it's quite a ways out there, about 70 miles. And the harbor there is not always available. Sometimes the harbor gets damaged by hurricanes, or it's just really, really crowded. So be careful when bringing your own boat. But this is also a really, really wonderful park to see Florida birds, fish, coral reefs, and other wildlife. That is pretty much my list of the 3 main national parks in Florida. So hopefully you found this video helpful. If you liked it, of course, leave a like and maybe subscribe. And I make a few videos throughout the week, so don't miss those.